The BMW E30 M3 looked like an ordinary 3 that one day came back from the racetrack and never wanted to be an ordinary car again. At first glance, it was still a compact sedan with one pair of doors. But all you had to do was look at the widened wheel arches, more aggressive bumpers, raised trunk lid, spoiler, and different proportions of the rear window to understand that it was not created for people looking for a calm car for everyday driving. It was a car built to win races, not as a luxury addition to the range, not as a marketing version with a stronger engine, but as a true homologation weapon. The E30 M3 was one of those cars that was created in the opposite way to most road cars. First came the regulations, the track, aerodynamics, weight, stiffness, and the possibility of developing the racing version. Only then did the right number of road examples have to be built so that everything would be legal. That is exactly why the first M3 has such an authentic character. It does not pretend to be motorsport. It comes from it. And when the M3 Sport Evolution appeared a few years later, BMW created the sharpest, most refined, and most desirable version of this legend. The history of the E30 M3 begins in the mid-80s, when BMW wanted to return to the highest level of touring car competition. In Germany, the DTM series, or Deutsche Tourenwagen Meisterschaft, was developing, and Group A regulations required racing cars to be based on production models. This meant that if BMW wanted to race a new, light, and effective machine, it first had to release the right number of civilian examples onto the roads. The regulations required 5,000 cars within 12 months. For BMW, this was an opportunity, but also a huge commitment. The regular third series of the E30 generation was already popular, light, and well received by the market. But for racing, it needed something far more radical. BMW Motorsport could not simply install a stronger engine and a few spoilers. It had to create a car that would be prepared for the track from the very beginning. In this sense, the M3 was more of a sporting tool than a classic road model. It debuted as a preview in 1985 and entered production in 1986, beginning one of the most important stories in the history of BMW M. The most important technical decision was the choice of engine. Logic suggested that BMW should use an inline-six because the brand was famous for such units, and the 325i already offered a strong and refined engine. The problem was that racing does not always reward what sounds best. The inline-six was heavier, longer, and less favorable for the balance of the front part of the car. BMW needed a light, high-revving engine that better suited the track character of the M3. The task was entrusted to Paul Rosche, one of the most important engineers in the history of the brand. He was a man connected, among other things, with BMW Motorsport engines and the turbocharged Formula One unit that helped Nelson Piquet win the World Championship. The result of his work was the S14 engine. It was an inline-four based on a solid block derived from the M10 family, but with an advanced 16-valve head inspired by larger M-Power engines. In the regular road version, it had 2.3 liters of displacement, 2 camshafts, Bosch Matronic injection, and around 200 horsepower. For the mid-80s in a compact sedan, this was an impressive figure. The S14 was not an engine created for lazy driving. Its character was best expressed by high revs, quick throttle response, and mechanical sharpness. Versions without a catalytic converter developed around 200 horsepower, while versions with a catalytic converter had slightly less. Maximum torque was around 240 Newton-meters, but the real magic appeared when the driver kept the engine high in the rev range. In racing versions, the unit could rev to values that suited a track car more than a sedan, with registration plates. Drive went exclusively to the rear axle through a 5-speed Getrag gearbox, often with a dogleg layout, meaning first gear was to the left and down. This solution was typically racing-oriented, because on track, you most often work between second, third, fourth, and fifth gear. The limited slip differential helped transfer power to the asphalt, and the weight of around 1,200 kilograms meant that the M3 was very fast, not only on the straight, but above all in corners. Acceleration to 100 kilometers per hour took around 7 seconds, and top speed reached around 235 kilometers per hour. The body of the E30 M3 was changed much more than it might seem to someone looking from a distance. It shared few elements with the regular 3. The hood and roof remained similar, but the rest was subordinated to aerodynamics and the demands of the track. The widened wheel arches allowed wider wheels and tires to fit. The bumpers and side skirts were made of plastic materials and designed to improve airflow. The rear window was more steeply angled, and the trunk lid was raised to work better with the spoiler. This was not decoration, but an element in the fight for stability and lower drag. BMW wanted the M3 to look aggressive, but the appearance came from function. The car had to be immediately recognizable and effective at the same time. Unlike the first M5, which could pretend to be an ordinary limousine, the M3 did not hide its ambitions. It was wide, tense, and ready to start. It was this look that made the E30 M3 one of the most characteristic cars of the 80s. It was not flashy in the style of a supercar, but it had the proportions of a small race car released onto the street. The chassis was also prepared much more seriously than in a regular E30. BMW changed the suspension geometry, used different control arms, anti-roll bars, joints, and axle components. The ZF power-assisted steering system was meant to be quick and precise, while disc brakes with ABS provided the confidence needed by a car capable of driving at sporting speeds. At the front, McPherson struts were used, and at the rear, a semi-trailing arm layout, typical of the E30, but refined for much higher loads. Standard BBS wheels with a diameter of 15 inches and wider tires looked very serious in the 80s, although today their size may seem modest. The interior was not a luxurious lounge, but a sporting cockpit. The M-Technic steering wheel, Recaro seats, onboard computer, and clear gauges created the atmosphere of a driver's car. The M3 was not meant to be brutally uncomfortable, but every element reminded you that it was created with homologation in mind. It was the civilian version of a car that was meant to fight Mercedes, Ford, Rover, Alfa Romeo, Volvo, and the rest of the touring car field. Sporting successes came very quickly. As early as 1987, the E30 M3 became one of the most important touring cars in the world. It won in DTM, in the European Championships, in the World Touring Car Championships, and in many local series. Roberto Ravaglia, Eric van der Poele, Johnny Cecotto, Steve Soper, Emanuele Pirro, and Joe Winkelhock are names that became forever linked with the legend of the M3. The car was light, agile, durable, and easy to develop. In touring car racing, it was not only power that mattered. Brakes, tires, aerodynamics, balance, reliability, and the ability to set up the car for different tracks all counted. The E30 M3 had all these qualities. In different versions, it won on DTM tracks, in the Spa 24 hours, Nürburgring 24 hours, and even in rallies. This is very important because few cars were able to be so effective in so many different conditions. The M3 was not a legend built solely by marketing. It was a car that proved its value day after day, race after race. That is why its reputation still has such strong foundations today. Because the regulations allowed further improvements to be homologated, BMW quickly began developing the M3 through Evolution versions. The first Evolution variants appeared in order to transfer new engine, aerodynamic, and chassis components to the track. In 1988, the M3 Evolution received, among other things, a more powerful engine, different wheels, and improved details. Later came Evolution 2, with even greater emphasis on weight, airflow, and performance. BMW had to respond to the competition because Mercedes was developing the 190 EI2316. Ford had the Sierra RS 500 Cosworth, and later Audi entered the fight with the V8 Quattro. DTM and Group A became a technological arms race. Every manufacturer looked for a way to gain an advantage within the limits of the regulations. For BMW, the natural finale of this road was the M3 Sport Evolution, also known as Evolution 3. This was not an ordinary limited edition for collectors. It was the final and most advanced stage in the development of the road-going E30 M3, prepared in order to homologate solutions needed in racing. That is exactly why the Sport Evolution is treated today as the holy grail of the entire generation. The M3 Sport Evolution was shown at the end of 1989, and production began at the turn of 1989 and 1990. Instead of the previous 2.3-liter engine, a unit enlarged to 2,467 cubic centimeters was used. The cylinder bore and piston stroke were increased. A special crankshaft was installed, along with sharper camshafts, larger intake and exhaust valves, sodium-cooled exhaust valves, oil jets under the pistons, and a modified exhaust system. Every engine had a catalytic converter, but despite this, it produced 238 horsepower at around 7,000 revolutions per minute and around 240 Newton-meters of torque. This was the most powerful production S14 engine fitted to the E30 M3. Combined with a 5-speed Getrag gearbox, a limited slip differential, and a weight of around 1,200 kilograms, it delivered performance that in the early 90s could embarrass far more expensive sports cars. Acceleration to 100 kilometers per hour took around 6.1 seconds, and top speed approached 250 kilometers per hour. It was still a 4-cylinder 3, but its effectiveness was sensational. The Sport Evolution also differed from the regular M3 in its bodywork and aerodynamics. At the front, there was an adjustable splitter, and at the rear, an adjustable additional flap on the spoiler. The settings could be chosen for different tracks and downforce levels, from fast Monza to more downforce-focused Nürburgring. In place of the fog lights, there were brake cooling ducts. The front grille had sealed gaps between the slats to improve airflow. Thinner side and rear glass, a lighter trunk lid, and lighter bumpers were used. The wheel arches were subtly modified so that larger wheels could be used in racing versions. The suspension was lowered by around 10 millimeters, and stiffer springs, dampers, anti-roll bars, and stronger wheel bearings were used. 16-inch BBS wheels had centers in Nogaro silver and 225 by 45 tires. The car was offered in only 2 colors, jet black with red inserts or brilliant red with black inserts. This made the Sport Evolution immediately look like something special, but still not exaggerated. It was aggressive, yet technical. The interior of the M3 Sport Evolution also had its own character. The most visible elements were the high-back Recaro sport seats, upholstered in material with the M motif, although black Nappa leather could also be ordered. Red seatbelts appeared, along with Alcantara on the M Technic 2 steering wheel, the gearshift gaiter, and the handbrake lever, while a numbered plaque was mounted on the center console. The gauges with red needles had a speedometer scaled to 260 kilometers per hour, a tachometer up to 8,000 revolutions, and an oil temperature gauge instead of the econometer known from regular E30 models. In standard form, the car was fairly raw, but BMW allowed it to be equipped with air conditioning, electric windows, a sunroof, an onboard computer, cruise control, headlight washers, or better audio. This is interesting because the Sport Evolution could be both an almost track-focused tool and a very fast road car with a certain dose of comfort. Still, the driver remained the most important element. The driving position, dog-leg gearbox, quick steering system, and engine that loved revs created an experience that could not be mistaken for an ordinary 3 Series. Production numbers are one of the reasons why the E30 M3 is so desirable today. The standard M3 with closed bodywork was built in 17,184 examples, while only 786 convertibles were produced. All E30 M3 cars had left-hand drive because the construction of the engine and exhaust system made preparing a factory right-hand drive version difficult. The Sport Evolution was even rarer. The regulations required 500 examples, but BMW built 600 units. That is not many, especially when we are talking about the most developed, most powerful, and most motorsport-focused version of the entire generation. Today, originality matters enormously. Numbers, service history, matching engine, body condition, mileage, color, equipment, and whether the car has been converted into a track car all matter. Many E30 M3 cars were used for years as intended, modified, repaired after accidents, or used in motorsport. That is why truly original, well-kept examples are becoming increasingly rare. A Sport Evolution in good condition is no longer just a car. It is a collector's artifact from an era in which a road car really had to exist so that its racing counterpart could fight on the track. How much can a BMW E30 M3 be worth today? The regular E30 M3 stopped being a cheap classic for fans of the brand a long time ago. Good examples often cost tens of thousands of euros or dollars, and very well kept, low-mileage cars can exceed levels that once seemed absurd for an old 3 Series. Average market values in public auction databases show figures around several tens of thousands of dollars, but the best cars are much more expensive. The Sport Evolution is a separate category. Today, one should rather think in terms of amounts from 150 to 250,000 euros for very good examples. And exceptional cars can go even higher. Public sale records have exceeded $300,000, and offers for ideal, low-mileage cars can approach 300,000 euros. In practice, value depends on condition, history, mileage, and originality. A restored car can be expensive, but the most desired examples are preserved, complete, and documented cars. The Sport Evolution is today one of those cars that stand on the border between the world of classics and investment-grade collector objects. It is no longer just a BMW for a fan of fast driving. It is one of the most important homologation models of the 90s. The BMW E30 M3 is an icon of motoring because it was born from the pure need to race. It was not created to look sporty in front of a shopping mall. Every widening, every spoiler, every suspension component, and every engine detail had a purpose. It is a car that transferred the philosophy of motorsport to public roads in an exceptionally authentic way. It was light, mechanical, precise, and direct. It did not have enormous power, but it did not need it, because its strength was balance. It could win on tracks, while at the same time giving the driver on the road a feeling of contact with the machine that many newer cars lack. The Sport Evolution is an icon within an icon, because it shows the final stage of development of this idea. A larger engine, adjustable aerodynamics, lighter elements, sharper suspension, and limited production made it the most desirable version of the first M3. It is the car that not only began the M3 dynasty, but also defined what a sporty BMW sedan should be. To this day, every subsequent M3 is judged through the lens of the E30, and that is exactly why the first M3 remains a legend. In the end, it is worth understanding that the BMW E30 M3 is not cult only because it is old, rare, and expensive. It is cult because it represents an era in which sports cars had a very simple, honest logic. If a manufacturer wanted to win, it had to build the right road car. If it wanted to improve the racing version, it had to create an evolution variant. Thanks to this, cars were created that had a real connection with the track. The E30 M3 is one of the best examples of this philosophy. It was civilized enough to drive on the road, but uncompromising enough to feel DTM, Nürburgring, and Spa in it. The M3 Sport Evolution pushed this idea to the limit. It was not a decorative special version, but the homologation finale of one of the most important BMW Motorsport constructions. That is why the E30 M3 and the M3 Sport Evolution are icons of motoring. They show that a legend is not born from advertising, but from engineering, regulations, victories, and character. These are cars that did not have to pretend to be racing machines. They really were created to win.